And we are live, as per the norm. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dungeon Nerds Podcast, Episode 2. Today's subject, the cultural influence that D&D has had on just the world in general, and how it's affected our lives and everything like that. I'm joined, as per normal, by the lovely Midnight Wolf.
Hello.
And as our intro, we're going to go over a little bit of the things that, like how long we played D&D for, and some of our characters that we're playing at the moment, and our favourite ones in the past. So, me personally, I've played D&D for about 8 years now. Had multiple characters, all tending towards the same gimmick. Anti-hero loner types. My current character is going to be is based off a Kamen Rider for a Japanese themed game, but I've played other ones such as Mateo Estiramar, who was a pirate lord. Sorry, Mateo Estiramar II, to be more precise, and that character's father and that character's father. Midnight, your characters. How long have you played for?
On and off, realistically, about 8
Yeah, about
years.
the same as me, innit?
Yeah.
Favourite character?
Probably Zuriel.
That's because Zuriel was broken. That's
I used the abilities once.
no.
Like, my favourite bit was being turned into an electric mouse. Rabbit. I was a rabbit.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'd say that's my favourite character of yours. But I did like Drusidia, the teenage vampire. She was fun as well.
Yeah, you're the second person to. Eyebrows has also noted that he liked the way I presented Bruce.
Yeah.
A very aristocratic lady that has a fascination for tea.
Yeah. It was just a really good character quirk. Just like, I don't care about anything as long as you do tea. Like, everyone else is getting wasted and you're just there with your teapot just pouring it out. I'm pretty sure we had a bar fight and you're just sat in the corner drinking your tea whilst it's going on. D&D for me has always been a great form of escape, but what I find fascinating about it is its history in and of itself. Looking at older editions and the complicated mess that was the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. No, Basic Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition. That was an overcomplicated mess of a system, but it was still incredibly popular. So, obviously, you probably don't know much, Midnight, about the history of D&D in and of itself, but
I know a little bit.
yeah.
An awful lot.
Well, for those who aren't aware, D&D was released in 1974 and was devised mostly by Gary Gygax with his team and was produced predominantly by them until it was picked up by by Wizards of the Coast. I think around about 4th edition came out. I think 4th was Wizards of the Coast 1st edition. In fact, fun fact, Games Workshop back in the 70s mainly they were the publishers and the people that what's the term, brought it out, I suppose, if you will. I can't think of the term off the top of my head. In the UK, that's how Games Workshop started off, Midnight. Literally selling D&D stuff, and then obviously they made their own games in the Warhammer verse. That's why there's so many comparisons between Warhammer Fantasy and D&D. It's because of the influence Dungeons and Dragons have had on Warhammer. So that's why elves are very
That makes sense.
That's why you get the high elves, dark elves, and wood elves in Warhammer Fantasy, and the way the Empire works, and everything like that, and especially the vampires. The vampires are probably the one thing that is very D&D in Warhammer Fantasy. Because if you think about like vampire characters, like the Von Carsteins, for example, they, honest to God, the Von Carsteins seem like you could run a Curse of Strahd campaign and rename Strahd Vlad von Carstein, and nobody would bat an eyelid because it would make sense. Like, even Strahd's backstory is very similar to Vlad's in certain ways, and you can make it work with Isabella. So I think the only difference is obviously Chaos. Chaos is rather more unique. And although we put it into D&D, it's not really a thing that exists in the D&D universe, if you will.
That's a whole different case.
Yep, that's a whole...
Homebrew map building.
Yeah, homebrew map building and Pantheon editions and everything like that. Yeah, it's... So yeah, D&D has had a huge... I think it's had the biggest impact on nerd culture compared to anything. It's much more... When people think D&D, they think nerds. Maybe not so much now, but for a long time, even I did when I was a kid, and hearing about Dungeons and Dragons, I had no idea about it, but I thought that it was very much a nerd thing to play. Not in a negative sense, because I was a nerd even back then, but it wasn't until I was about 18, 19, when Eyebrows first mentioned that he was playing it, that I had an interest in it. And I recommended it to you guys, didn't I?
Yeah.
And we had our first game with Eyebrows DMing, because he was the only one that had ever played D&D before.
Yeah.
And I think 5th edition had just come out, but Eyebrows had only played 4th. And it was this bastardised form where we used stats from Warhammer Fantasy.
I think it was in... There was a couple of PDFs on what it was going to be like.
Yeah, it was coming, but it wasn't out proper when we first started playing. So, but even then, we didn't play. It wasn't D&D that we was playing. It was very much this. We used the stat lines that existed for Warhammer Fantasy for monsters and ourselves. It was very weird, wasn't it? What we played, like it was an absolute mess because we didn't know how to play it properly.
Yeah, I think the first year we didn't even own a D20.
No, we didn't. No, and it was longer than that. For about a year and a half, we rolled 2d6 for any ability checks, didn't we? Because as predominantly 40k players, we had plenty of d6s, but no more than that. So it was just this very weird mix of multiple things influencing it. And I think back to it now, and even our party at the time was very, I'd say, very typical of a first start-up party. It was just a group of murder hobos with one person just like, no, don't do that. I'm supposed to be good. And and yeah.
It turns out the way.
No, it doesn't. I think everyone has to get through that murder hobo phase, though, if you get what I mean. Like.
Yeah, I fully understand that.
But D&D is widely credited as the first role-playing game, and from the research that I've gone into for this podcast, I can't find any evidence of anything existing beforehand, official anyway. There might have been, some role-play that existed amongst the wargaming circles of the late 60s and everything, but nothing quite like proper role-play, like fantasy role-play. And earlier systems would have been devised, but they would have been much more homebrew, if that makes sense. So it would have been players playing with just their friends, and the rules would only made sense to each other if it did exist. But shortly after D&D was brought out, there's a sudden influx of multiple systems in different settings, like not just fantasy. You've also got sci-fi and Lovecraftian horror and all sorts coming out in a very short period of time that I'm pretty sure you might not have heard of it, Midnight, but you might have, because the rulebook, I'm pretty sure, is in our local game store. It is in Consulting Gamer. Traveller. You might have seen the rulebook.
I have probably seen the rulebook, yeah.
Yeah, but you know next to nothing about it. Well, Traveller was first released in 1976 and is a sci-fi setting where you play a bunch of It's very Star Wars in certain ways, and I guarantee that a lot of people used Traveller to play a Star Wars setting when it first came out, because obviously Star Wars was quite new at the time, and they would have used something like that to play a Star Wars themed game. But it's very like space orientated, where you can like travel the galaxy and everything like that. But it's super complicated, even in comparison to some stuff we played Midnight. And it's just, you see this sudden rise of role playing games, and it's very much like college students playing them in their dorms and everything like that. That I think is the stereotype with D&D, or role playing games in general. But then you see this sudden increase in associations with cults. And
Well, I can see where they get their ideas from.
well, I view it as a misunderstanding, and a classic American misunderstanding, because there was a whole cult craze during the 70s. Obviously after like the Manson family and everything like that, there was very much a focus on not joining a cult and everything like that. And I'm pretty sure from what I've heard over the years, that it mostly stems from a couple of raids conducted by the FBI and other organisations finding D&D rulebooks at these cult gatherings. And that's where this whole thing stems from. There was another case, I believe in 1978, I could be wrong about the year though, where a man committed suicide, and his mother blamed it on D&D. Now it promoted devil worship and everything like that, and tried and unsuccessfully sued the creators of Dungeons and Dragons for their part in her son's death, and founded an organisation focused against promoting negativity towards D&D. And it's there's a meme that's gone around for years about things that lead to the devil and hell, and it's got stuff like cyberpunk culture, D&D.
Yes, the newspaper article.
Yeah, you know the one I'm on about. It's a very classic one that's gone around the internet over the years, and you look at it and you're just like, I'm fucked. But that
is true.
I don't see how, if you get what I mean. Like, some of them are also counterintuitive to each other, because it's like the whole cultist thing. Yes, you can play as like a bad guy, but most players, even if say you're a warlock with a fiend patron, which is very much a modern thing, most of them tend to focus on you trying to counteract the negative effects of that your patron wants to do in a way, and everything like that. Like, there's no upside to just being plain evil, and they don't get the concept that it is just a form of escape and fun. Like, I've never at the end of a game had like end of a session with you guys gone, do you know what? I really want to summon a demon. Let's do that next, guys. Let's get out the Ouija board. Like, I've never.
There's certain things banned in my house.
Yes,
And there's one of them.
Like, I've
putting my foot down there.
like I've never once thought that. Like, I think
No, we have had a couple where I've gone like, I really fancy going on a ghost hunt now, because the theme that especially for our Halloween games,
yeah, they're
it
very
is
spooky and everything like that. But it's
that level of,
Yeah.
of enjoyment that I want to go do the real thing now.
like, yeah,
That's the most of it, really.
yeah. It's never a case of let's form a cult. Let's murder a virgin. I've never known any D&D player to ever truly think of that. And of course, you're going to get some people like negative types. I mean, we've spoken about it before in some of the older podcasts that we did of people in the D&D community who are very negative and very like people that we wouldn't want to play with or wouldn't want to talk to about D&D. And
Thinking about it, I don't even know any virgins. that was out the window.
but even then, like, I don't entirely know where it come from. And maybe it's a classic case of it's a new thing, because if you really think about it, there's a lot of things, especially during the 70s and the 60s, that they said led to devil worship.
There was a huge amount of things.
Like
one
rock
thing
music.
If you like this particular type of flowers that were more associated with the dark side of.
Oh yeah, if you're going back to the Middle
Like
Ages
that.
and the more puritanical times, and it seems like people who accused it of that didn't understand the core concept of what D&D is. D&D is a group of friends coming together and more or less telling a story. And by saying that D&D leads to devil worship, in effect is saying that choose your own adventure storybooks lead to devil worship.
Have you ever read any of those? They are confusing as all hell.
And can be quite dark if you get the right ones. But
Yeah.
the point still stands. That's effectively what you are playing with D&D. It's to choose your own story in a way. But the DM sets the guidelines for something, and then you choose your actions affect how you get to that point. That's how D&D in my mind is supposed to work. Your actions affect how you get there and what the ultimate outcome is, because it could be good, it could be bad, but that's the whole point of it. And luckily enough, in recent years, that's less of a thing. Like, D&D is more popular now than it's ever been before. I mean,
it has exploded.
yeah. I mean, the amount of people,
So many things.
yeah, the amount of people I know that are like, I love to give D&D a go. And they're not nerds at all. Like, they're not into Warhammer. They're not huge, like, Lord of the Rings fans or anything like that. But they're just like, yeah, I'd love to give D&D a go. Like, it sounds like a lot of fun. That's brilliant.
Well, there's still quite a few people on Facebook asking for people if they have space for their games and things like this.
Yeah.
There is a lot of people out there wanting to play.
Plus, its use in the prison system and with autistic children has proven that it can have very positive effects. Like, studies are still in their early stage, but there's a lot of evidence to support that it actually helps autistic children deal with social
It's all about
interaction.
Social skills.
Yeah.
You're learning your letters, you're learning your numbers, and you're learning how to interact with other people.
Yeah.
Taking yourself out of.
But because they're learning how to interact with other people from people that they either know, especially like from the other players, most likely they know them because they go to school and something, but also a DM that they know, but they know it's different characters. I think that can help greatly with dealing with not just autistic children, but also social anxiety and stuff like that. It can have very positive effects. And I think that's what the takeaway when it comes to D&D. So they're focusing on all the negatives. Like, yes, it includes all this bad stuff and everything like that. But
it's how you word stuff.
well,
There's
it's
several stories going around about a father and 3 daughters, and they had to save this village from a pack of wolves. They befriended the wolves and now have an army, and they're trudging around the countryside with this army pack of wolves.
yeah. That's one, it's cute as all fuck, and 2 is a great example of a dad introducing something that he loves to his children.
Yeah, but it's also at any age, as long as you word it correctly, for
Yeah.
age-appropriate things.
Oh yeah, hands down.
We go to a bar when the boy plays, it's full of juice. You know, it's how you word things.
Yeah, well, it's also, he knows what alcohol is, but it's funny because even when he's playing a character that's old enough to drink, he won't drink.
No.
That's what I love about the boy. Even if he's playing as a character who is over the drinking age, he still won't drink. He'll just be like,
He's like our designated
yeah, he's our
next
driver, yeah.
That boy.
And he finds it, he finds it funny, but he's also like very much like, I suppose it's a mixture of kids can join from any age with D&D, but they need to have. But it's important. Don't blame D&D for character flaws that appear in your children. Blame your shitty parenting skills. like it's like parents that stick their kids in front of YouTube for 6 hours a day, and just let YouTube look after their kids, and then complain about the content that's on YouTube. Don't fucking let them watch shit then. You know.
Or at least monitor it.
Yeah, monitor
You
what
know,
what your.
in the damn room.
Yeah, and I think that's important for D&D. Like you've got to. You shouldn't just let your kids join a random game. You should monitor what they're watching, you know, or what they're playing with it.
Yeah, because there was a whole thing a few years back with under 12s playing Call of Duty and how they became overly violent and everything else. And it turns out most of those children have some sort of mental disability.
Yeah, like don't blame games or any form of media for how you're. And this is connected to D&D because everyone blames D&D for the character flaws. Don't blame whatever media your kids are checking out for what you are for their character flaws. Blame your shitty parenting, because it's down to you. You are the adult. You should, if your kids are playing D&D, one, especially if they're the age that the boy is. The boy is around about 8 years old. You wouldn't let him play with a bunch of teenagers sank that you didn't know for obvious reasons, right? He only plays D&D with us until he's older. He's only allowed to play D&D with us, and even then he's not.
Until he starts on his own at school.
Yeah, and even then, he's not allowed to take part in every game that we play, because we play rather adult or more adult games. We're in more adult settings. For example, Black Crusade. He wasn't allowed to partake in that because we dealt with much more.
So upset.
Yes, he was very upset about that. Because he loves 40k, and he was just like, why can't I play this? And we're like, because it's more adult than what D&D is. And we would only play those games when he was at his dad's or at his nan's, you know, because. But we was conscious about that, and nobody complained about that, because it was just like, he's not old enough to be taking part in these games yet. You know, we can only do it on these occasions, and we'll only do it on those occasions, and that's very much the case. Like that's us, not just you, but us as a group taking responsibility and being like, he's not old enough for this yet, so we shouldn't include him in this yet. You know what I mean? Like,
That's good parenting.
yeah, that's being a goddamn parent. And he didn't like it, and definitely one day he will join us for Black Crusade, and he'll probably absolutely love it. He'll love being a bad guy for once. All right, but
Well, normally if he doesn't really fancy playing, or his character isn't in the games that we're playing,
he'll play the bad guy.
the bad guys.
Yeah, he'll
Whether that's the clay golem that nearly TPK'd the party, or
yeah, in the most bullshit boss fight I've ever been in.
the boy rolls too many D20s and always lands a natural 20.
Yeah, always
So
gets in that 20, and I fucking hate running games with him where he's just like, I'm gonna do this, and I'm like, that's a really stupid roll for me, and then he gets a 20, and he's just like, there you go, I did it. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that, Harry, or boy. And he's just like, no, I did, you know. Harry Sambear Killer Gaffer Kanafi. That is not how D&D works. It is, I got a 20.
barbarian we've ever had.
Yes, because everyone just kept on giving the damn barbarian stuff that the barbarian shouldn't bloody have. But the point...
It was his birthday.
Yeah, true.
They gave him birthday presents.
Yes.
Right, as a party, we gave our barbarian birthday presents.
But the point is that you can't blame D&D for negative traits that appear in your kids, because I found that once you've got through there's kind of like a growth within D&D itself. Like, everyone starts off as a murder hobo, regardless what you say. I don't care whether you was like holier than thou. Everyone starts off with a group of murder hobos, and either you're the odd one out or you're a part of it. Always, you know, little consequences, just having fun, mostly just to get used to the core game and playing it in and of itself. And then after like your first campaign or your first 2 campaigns, that almost entirely disappears. That phase is gone, and people find ways that they either go down, like we mentioned before in the previous podcast, go down the damage numbers and being the best combat orientated character, like Clinch, or they go down the more roleplay based line and focus more on just being like more roleplay based with no broken stats, really, quite being underpowered but still being really, really good characters, like myself or Blake Mamba. That tends to be what we go down. And again, not going to get into that whole subject. Neither way is a wrong way to play, but regardless, you always start off as murder hobo, and that's not. People take those first games and view that as that's D&D when they're seeing it from the outside, when that isn't D&D. And
no, that's a whole gameplay that is basically you learning how your abilities work, how your scores work, how the dice work, how everything else works.
But I also think that D&D in itself became kind of like a rallying point for nerds, because it was. It
did.
It was.
It made a huge impact very quickly.
Yeah, because it's a pop culture icon. Pretty much everyone has heard of Dungeons and Dragons. You say to people, "Oh, I'm playing Black Crusade," and they're just going to look at you and go, "What's that?" You play somebody and playing Dungeons and Dragons, they're going to have some idea that it's a game. All right, they're not going to know they may not know like exactly what it's like, but they're going to know, or they will have heard. Yeah.
There are still some that you do have to physically explain what it actually.
But it's like, I'm playing Pathfinder or Black Crusade or Deadlands. It's like no one's really going to have much of an idea what you mean by that. But Dungeons and Dragons is by itself just like this flag planted in the ground that proudly concerns this is nerdom. This is our rallying point that all can get behind. Whether you agree with certain rules, decisions, or anything like that, it's a rallying point for people to get behind. And then it like subdivides into different camps in and of itself. But I think it was the first thing that really existed that was that. If you get what I mean. Before D&D, there was nothing really. I mean, you had comics, but they were very much viewed as a childlike thing. And then you got D&D, and you hear people say, "Oh, isn't that a kids' game?" D&D is not a kids' game. Like, kids can play it, but it is not a kids' game.
No, there has been. What was it? One of the Facebook groups I'm in. Yeah, a guy posted up. We have been playing in the same world for 38 years.
Yep.
And we're not quite sure where to go from here. We have done everything to do with D&D.
Well,
They started in second, and they went all the way up to now.
Yeah, which is freaking awesome. But we've been playing in the same world pretty much for 8 years, us lot, like our core group.
Yep.
And it's only now where we're going, where some of us, like myself included, are like, we're going to continue the world we've played the entire time at yours, Midnight. Games based at yours, for the most part, are viewed as taking place in the old world, for want of a better term, that we played in this entire time. And I'm going my own way with a new world for my games that I'm running, and they're always going to be set in my new world from now on, with the games I run at mine. And yours, they're the old worlds. So, yeah.
Well, D-Master is running a game at some stage, and he's taking the map with an alternate timeline.
Yes.
So half the map will be destroyed.
Which is going to be incredibly. I'm really looking forward to playing that, because it's going to be really, really interesting to see what Demaster has changed about the world. And see, that's another thing. D&D encourages creativity and imagination like nothing else. It really does. Even even Warhammer doesn't encourage creativity to the scale that D&D does. It's like, you know, you can make up when you even if you're not coming up with your own world, just your character coming up with like unique things with your character. It's so much fun to just create characters sometimes for D&D.
And several people have a list as long as your arm of characters.
Yes.
And then there's people like me that I've run out of characters.
Yeah.
The D-Masters game, I'm out of ideas.
Yeah, you've got no idea what you was going to be doing for D-Masters game.
No idea. But then I don't plan 3 games ahead. That is something that I don't do.
Well, it's. I mean, we can discuss this after the podcast, but but one thing, your character that you've got planned for Eyebrows game, you could do a different take on her of that, like an alternate universe version of her.
I could do. I was looking at doing a rogue this time round.
Oh, that'd be.
My last rogue fizzled drastically.
Yeah. But anyway, we're drastically off topic with that. So I'm going to get back onto the topic with a very simple Critical Role has had some of the biggest influence on D&D than anything else. More so than the shitty film that was made based in Dungeons and Dragons, more so than the 80s cartoon, more than anything. It's had a massive impact on D&D and has, in my mind, helped grow D&D more than anything else possibly could. And as such, it should be respected, and for those of you who haven't watched it, you should. It is a huge amount of fun, the stories are epic, the characters are very, very enjoyable, and the players themselves are also just awesome to watch playing. But now you've kind of noticed this, Midnight, because obviously a lot of the D&D groups that you're a part of on Facebook and the like, you've noticed this. A lot of people have come into it, and
they have expected it to be
like
just as Critical
yeah,
Role.
just like Critical Role.
And they're struggling to grasp the different concept of it.
Yes.
Critical Role is based in its own bubble.
Well, it's more than just based in its own bubble. You've also got to remember that one, all the players that are playing are either professional actors or voice actors. Okay? 2, the DM is, well, Matt Mercer. There's this very unfair comparison I feel exists in the community, and it's less so now because a lot of people have spoken out about it, and if you've spoken out about it, my hat's off to you because I completely agree. It is unfair to compare DMs to Matt Mercer. That is not a fair comparison to make.
No, it's not, because each DM has its own style.
Yes.
Mine is terrible.
Mine is very much more scene based. I'll describe the scene to the point where I'm describing the smells that the players are smelling and stuff like that. And my weakness has always been combat. I've gotten better. I know full well I've gotten better at running combat encounters for you guys. But that was always my weakness before, and it's something that I focused to improve. Now, although you can't compare DMs to Matt Mercer, that doesn't mean that DMs get a free rein to be crap. You need to take criticisms and improve. Learn from each mistake that you make. And although you might make it again, just try and learn from it and grow as a DM. Being good takes time. It's not an overnight thing. At all. I've never had, not just you, Midnight, but think about every person the first time they've DM'd in our group. Right? Have they been any good?
I'm not outright going to say everyone was terrible, but at the same time, there has been a lot of improvement.
Yeah. When you compare a lot of the DMs that we have in our group to where they started when they first DM'd to how they are now, you can see the improvement there. All right? But everyone starts off worse than they can eventually become. There are exceptions to that rule. We know a big one. But
Yep.
How can it start so good and end so badly? um, but for the most,
I don't know.
but for the most part, it's the unfair comparison for DMs. But also that can extend to the players. A lot of DMs expect their players to be as good as the cast of Critical Role. Now, in our group, in our own group, we have a core section of people that will put on voices. For example, myself and Demaster will. So will Blake Mamba. We'll put on voices like unique ones or as unique as we can make them for pretty much each character we do, don't we? So
Yes.
we do a voice, and the majority of the group can identify the character personally from the voice. Like, you know the difference between Matty L's voice, for example, Midnight, and Sevatar's voice, don't you?
Yes.
You can, like, Sevatar speaks in, like, a perfect example is that time that Demaster, I described a tall figure in dark armour wearing a red, what looks like a red cloak. He assumed it was his old character, starts having a go at him, and then I just turn around and just in Sevatar's voice go, and who are you? I don't recognize you. And he's just like, oh, crap. Because he's losing it at someone that he knows can wreck him. And he's just like, hi, yeah, I thought you were someone else. I figured as much that you thought I was someone else. No worries. And it just led to one of my favourite moments. And it's, obviously, Demaster puts on a lot of different voices as well. All of them tend.
Oh, the voice for his...
It's when he changes voices, like Gunther. Like, you know, one game he'd be Scottish, the next game he'd be talking in this posh voice, and I would just go in. Like, I was just like, I thought he was Scottish. Well, he's changed. He's no longer Scottish. He's changed. He's changed in between games. Yes, because he would forget what voice he used.
Yeah, but that all tied into the character's background of he ran a caravan.
Yeah,
So
and he'd picked up multiple
it worked
accents.
really well.
Yeah, he picked up multiple accents and then would switch constantly.
Star Trek voice.
Oh yeah, the Star Trek. For those of you that don't know, we play Star Trek Adventures, which is a Star Trek role-playing game. Very, very fun game. I tend to run it as I am the Trekkie in the group, and Demaster plays as a Vulcan he plays as a Vulcan that has thrown away logic, which is a canon thing, but he didn't grow up on Vulcan, he grew up in Brooklyn. But he doesn't have his Brooklyn accent, for any that have watched Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged, is directly ripped off of Joey Wheeler from Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged. So it's just out of nowhere, you know, they're dealing with Clint, and it's just like, Brooklyn Rage! And he'll just kick a door down. And it's just, we have this Brooklyn Vulcan that's just like, I'm still technically canon! Come at me, and I'm just like, oh my god, no. But it's always funny. Blake Commander, bless him, he has a skill unlike any other I've ever seen. He has the ability to, without fail, come up with a voice that will make all of the members of the group go, will you please stop talking like that? Like when he used.
His voice is squeaky beyond helium.
Yes, but it's gotten better compared to what it used to be. Like, he was squeak, and like multiple lads would just go, Jesus Christ, and just holding their ears, and you just feel this pain shoot into your brain whenever he talks. But Archie's voice has gotten better, and I mean, Greta's was probably the best one he had was.
Feminine voice he's had.
Yeah, Sarah wasn't as feminine as Greta. Greta was more feminine in my mind, but he still puts in a lot of effort, and cops to him to that. Like, I can't dispute that. As for Braze and Eyebrows, they've never put on voices for their characters.
No.
But I put that more down to they probably don't feel comfortable enough to, which is completely understandable.
Well, Eyebrows has a habit of playing female characters,
Yes.
and I don't think his voice goes high enough
No, it doesn't. He's got a very, very low pitched
for
voice.
that sort of voice act,
Yeah.
at least.
Um,
So I think it's technical difficulties
Yeah.
with his voice.
Lynch has done voices before, but doesn't do it so much now. It tends to be like subtle deviations from his own voice. And in total honesty, Lynch's last character, which was Kevin, was based purely on him. So it wasn't so much him doing. He was playing himself with Kevin, so he didn't need to put on a voice for it. But he did with Stripey Baby. But the point is
Whole different character for a whole different
is that I don't value my players that don't put on voices to those that do any less, because there's it's whether they feel comfortable enough to. Like the boy, for example, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. It depends on how comfortable he feels. I think he feels a little bit awkward sometimes doing it, which is why he didn't do it for Puss, for example. He is only 8, yeah, but it's like the voice.
It's still there to come.
Yeah, well, the voice I put on for Puss, whenever the boy wasn't able to be there for a game, he was just like, yes, that's Puss's voice. That's exactly how he talks. You know the whole bit where I'm just like, I am Puss in boots. Meow.
Yeah.
First time I did that, and everyone just breaks down, just like this super serious voice, and you just go meow. You're not even actually doing the meow. It's just you're saying it as if to remind people that you are in fact a cat. Harry, like the boy, loved that. He absolutely loved that, and he turned around to me and was just like, no, that's Puss's voice. But he didn't feel comfortable enough to do it himself because he's still quite young.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, admittedly, at the moment, everyone has to do French at school. So he's trying to wrap his head around French as a sounding and a language.
Yes.
So throwing in an extra thing on top of that.
Yeah.
may have puzzled
Give
the
it
brain a little
give
bit.
it time, and I think he will be the kind to do something like that. He's getting there slowly.
Learning German
Yeah.
as well at the same time.
Yes, and little bits of Russian because he's weird.
Yes.
But the point I'm trying to get across is that we have people that do it and people that don't. Mostly the ones that have watched Critical Role are the ones that try to put on voices, like large amounts, like myself, the Master, and Blake Mamba. We are the ones that tend to do the voices because we watch Critical Role. But I don't think that makes a D&D player, because I don't expect anyone when they first come into a game to put on a voice. I don't expect anyone who's been playing for years to put on a voice for their character. It's not a necessity. Like, and also intricate backstories. Intricate backstories don't have to be a thing.
No.
Like, I know.
I've had people that have literally, I have a pirate ship, this is me.
Yeah, I mean, I know myself and Lynch for the Masters campaign have quite an in-depth backstory, but it's not intricate. It's pretty simple, and very. I will admit it's not overly original, if you get what I mean. What me and Lynch are doing, it's a very you killed my.
Well, it doesn't have to be
No.
original.
But it's more a point of me trying to push my role play to a level that I never have done before with it, and which will be really interesting. I think will be really, really interesting to see. But I've had intricate backstories that have just made me given to me by players that just made me scratch my head and just be like, what? It's like, oh yeah, it works out this way. I'm just like, what? You want me to work this in? Yeah. You sure you don't want to rewrite it? Why? Oh, no reason. It's great. It's great. It's great. Oh Jesus.
Highlight the important pieces, please.
Yeah. I highlight certain bits. Tend to ignore 50% of it because I'm just like, this is too much. Like when you get a 5,000 word essay off of a certain player that shall go unnamed, Blake Mamba. I mean, nobody. But
And then at the moment I have a character with their backstory in the campaign.
Yeah, because
It's
that can be also another way to
20
do it.
years.
Yeah, but that can also be another way to do it. Just walk it through and work out as you go along. But on the upside, Critical Role has introduced people that before wouldn't have bothered. Like, I know a lot of people that watched Critical Role because Matt Mercer is running it, and they like his work in Resident Evil, Overwatch, everything like that, and are really happy to run it with him. So it's had a positive and negative effect on the group as a on the fandom as a whole. But it has helped introduce newer people to
It has had such a bang since Critical Role started.
yes, massive fan. We're getting more players now than ever before.
Yeah, it has had such a boom in everything.
I mean, our local gaming store, the Consulting Gamer, runs D&D games. Obviously, they're not at the moment due to lockdown restrictions and everything, but they were running D&D games, and they had a waiting list.
They did.
So
They
did
at least 3 months
yeah.
for a waiting list.
So did Chaos Cards. That had a waiting list for its games as well, which is much bigger than Consulting Gamer. So you'd think that they'd have it less, but
Yeah.
they had a waiting list. I'm pretty sure that
Dark
Express.
Destiny had a waiting list, which is another one
Yeah,
that was all connected with ours.
but it's insane. Like, how many people are getting into it now, and it's like, no, you don't. But I think the thing is with D&D is that you don't have to buy all the books, you don't have to get all the models or anything like that. All you need is some dice and a sheet with your character on it. And thanks to stuff such as D&D Beyond or the wiki or anything like that, or just the groups that exist to help you with it, especially
But the, apps, I use the apps a lot.
you have such
Right,
you have
I-
so much access to it now compared
Yeah,
to
you can take it everywhere.
well, compared to even just 10 years ago. Because you remember how much of a ball ache it used to be for us to find anything D&D related that wasn't homebrew on the wiki. And
Yeah.
it used to be a nightmare to find anything because we didn't have Consulting Gamer to just pop to and get the newest book or pre-order the newest book that was coming out soon. We didn't have D&D Beyond to access. So we've kind of seen it grown so much, like a lot of other players have, in such a short period of time, that it's very different compared to what it was when even we started out in a relatively short time ago compared to some people. It's much easier to get hold of it now, which is why we follow the rules more closely now than we ever did before, because we have the damn books to do so. Or
Yeah.
or
That is
to
a big help.
yeah, or to quote the $5 million man, we have the technology. like
Yeah.
like we do. We can, don't worry, we can rebuild him.
The player's handbook made so much difference.
Oh yeah, and bearing in mind that wasn't the first book for D&D that we got. The first one was Rise of Tiamat. I bought Rise of Tiamat, and everyone was just like, "Oh, cool, we got a campaign book," and it had nothing in there to help us.
Nope.
And then the next one we got, I'm pretty sure, was the Dungeon Master's Guide because we're idiots, and then we got the Player's Handbook.
No, we did get the player's handbook first.
No, I bought the Dungeon
No,
Master's
I-
Guide first. Because we've had 4
Yeah.
Dungeon Master's Guides in the books over the year, in our group over the years. and I got the first one.
Really?
Yeah, I got the first one. But it was missing parts and then
I
you
know I
ended up getting
ordered-
it.
I know I ordered our player's handbook.
Yes.
Because I got it as the new release bit.
Yes.
Um,
But it wasn't. I mean, I know some players that got into it through Critical Role, and they tend to have a different view on like they come into it very eager, expecting all DMs to run games like Matt Mercer, when that's not the case. I mean, I'm pretty sure even Matt Mercer himself has spoken out about it and said that he did his tutorial videos for Dungeon Masters, which is really, really good. If you're ever getting into DMing yourself, you should definitely check them out. They're on the Geek and Sundry YouTube channel. Absolutely great for tips and tricks on running your game. but even outright said, you know, I've got literally decades of running games. Compared to somebody that's been playing for like a few years, or even just DMing for a few years, it's not a fair comparison to make. He's got more experience to draw upon than say me or you do. A lot more. Give it another 10 years and I'll probably be 10 times better than I am now, or I like to think I will be anyway. And the same for you. Like, if you ever go back to DMing again, although I think you're going to play because you just want to enjoy playing without the stress of running a game.
Yeah, no, because we have such a unique, diverse group.
Yeah.
It puts a lot of brain stress.
Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on you.
Trying to balance out a high damage deal to a person that doesn't like using weapons that isn't a monk.
Yeah. You need to have the ability to.
It's a hard balance.
Yeah, it's a hard balance, and it's a lot of stress. Even for me, whenever I do planning, it's a lot of stress because everything is put on you.
Especially because I'm having to do it all online as well. So I've got my Discord running.
Which isn't an optimal way to play. Discord is not an optimal way to play. It's useful as a stopgap, but
yeah, I also use Roll20 to build. I have to self-build every single map that I have.
Yeah.
I have to self-build it, screen share it. I have to move all the models because for some reason not everyone can access Roll20. So it's quite hard when I've got a puzzle room set up. And like I've got somebody else running the timer for me.
Yeah.
And I've got to do the time for them. It's very hard trying to do all that.
Yes, most definitely.
It is hilarious though when our group gets a puzzle because they just can't manage it.
Yeah. No, it's the thing is we're so used to combat because I think we've spoken about this before as a group, but talking now more as players. And we've had it easy for a long time with us because it's only fairly recently that we started coming across magic users as enemies, which I know to older players listening to this podcast may seem daft, but it was always something that was overlooked by a lot of DMs, myself included.
Yeah, no, as a DM playing with spellcasters,
it's so much fun.
Hard. It is fun, but then when you're dealing with about 4, 5, 6 of them, because I did a siege episode, I'm going to call it an episode.
Yeah, it's the best way to sum it up how we play.
Yeah, and I was playing with, there was about 6 different spellcasters with different levels, different spells.
Yep.
It was so much extra work.
Yep.
But I have about 2 hours before game starts to set all my spells for the day, set where all my warriors are going to go, just as a final prep.
Yeah.
It takes me about 4 days to prep a game at the moment.
Well, yeah, because you're doing it on Roll20, whereas for me, I do all my planning in a single day, and normally the day before the game, get it all out of the way, all written down, like handwritten, because that's just how I like to do things. And then I'm prepped.
My notebook, which has all the written down stuff from the stat monsters that I'm using to how this is going to run, if there's any battle music, what place I got it from, you know, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I'll go and make my map. And I'll be there for a day.
Yeah.
And I'll come back the next day and tweak it.
As long as the DM puts in effort into the planning, I think nothing else matters.
No.
We've had DMs that
no one sets everything on fire, it'll be fine.
We've had DMs that have put no preparation into their games, and then they complain when it goes off the rails. You know, I think a lot of respect.
There weren't any rails to start with.
No. I think you know, DMs that put in like the work that is required to do it should be given respect. And hands off to you, DMs out there as a fellow one and as a player, you are appreciated. Thank you for your hard work. But now I want to get
You
on.
also get the ones that are just bullet point it and just
Yeah.
fly off wherever.
Yeah.
That they're magicians in their own right.
Yes, they are. And DMs that can do that, I also have a lot of respect for, because it's not easy to do that.
No,
and
your brain must be 10 times bigger than ours.
yeah. But now I want to get on to less on the cultural impact and everything like that, and more what does D&D mean to you, Midnight?
Well, to me it almost feels like it's a family time. Like, everyone comes over to mine, they're all gathering around the table, we all sit and have dinner, like we tell everyone how our week's been going,
Yeah.
and then we play. And it's a really nice group gathering.
Yeah.
It is kind of like a family session.
Yeah, it's our D&D games are always remind me. When I was younger, it was very common on Saturdays for me to go around my grandparents, and we'd have all the family there for dinner, and it reminds me a lot of that as well. You're right. So it's like this, you know, even with like the whole arguments that come along with it and everything like that with family gatherings, we get that as well. But I wouldn't change any of the players for anything. I love all the people in our little group that play together, and it is very much like a family. To the point where even our gaming clan that we formed was influenced by D&D with its name. Like, it was I named it in honour of two of our main groups or main parties that we'd played as, and it's for me it's a great way to get out frustration and just enjoy yourself and just escape into this fantasy world. And we have a rule in our group where anything that's said around the table between the players in character isn't to be taken personally. Like, we've had characters that have despised each other, like Holy and Surely.
Yeah.
But the players are
In
best
real
friends.
life, yeah.
That one, like two characters that popped to mind for me was my first one, Lumos Romin, and Draken.
Yes.
Now, our two characters despised each other in every sense of the word, and it was very tense moments where we'd talk, and for the most part it was the rest of the group, you know, just acting as peacekeepers between us. But the players themselves, like myself and the other player, we got along really, really well, and it was never taken personally. Another example I can think of is a perfect example really is Otley and everyone else.
Yes.
Otley's a very stereotypical abrasive dwarf that doesn't get along with anyone.
No.
But overall,
Takes
it's
the goblin under his wing because it is also an underground dweller.
yeah,
Right?
and it's just left like that. Like it's led to some very tense moments between the groups, or in between like the characters. But the players themselves know that it's not personal. And I mean, with all the stuff that's coming up in Demaster's game, I've outright said to him, just so you know, my character is going to say shit, and it's going to be to you because of what you're role playing as, and I don't want you to take any of it personally. And he was just like, nope, I know it's what it's aimed at. You don't have to worry a single bit. Say whatever you want to me.
You had a drow character that was incredibly insulting.
No, I think the best way to put it is put it how it was. He was racist. he hated high elves, and I mean, I think a perfect example of it, for the first 2 months of me playing as, because that was Varys, for the first 2 months of me playing as Varys, I didn't refer to Sarah, the only human in our group at the time, or in our party at the time, by her actual name. Whenever I was talking to her, I would always call her lower life form. Like every single time, and that went on for 2 months.
Yeah.
And
several times you got thrown out the library because you insulted the librarian.
yeah, first time
An elf.
First time I met her. Yeah, first time I met her, and she's just like, I'm just like, oh, you're an elf, and she's just like, yes, I'm a high elf, and I went, oh, yes, a lower elf. I've met a few of you, and I immediately get thrown out, and I'm just like, I don't even care. I got it out. Peace. But it was all the whole point of that was it was a because of what he'd gone through. To those that don't know, Drow are generally mistrusted and looked upon as treacherous because of their part, because of their lineage and everything like that, and their ancestry and what's happened with them. But he had grown up on the surface, not in the Underdark, so he'd had to deal with all of that prejudice firsthand. So he immediately had negative viewpoints on high elves, wood elves, and humans. He didn't have an issue with Dragonborn because any of his contact with them had been quite pleasant, and he didn't have issue with dwarves because he hadn't had much contact with them, which meant that the Dragonborn and the dwarf that we had in our group he got along with fairly well. He still wasn't very trusting of them, but he wasn't outwardly aggressive or anything like that. And it was the whole point of, you've got to prove your worth to him. And we had a moment where he was reintroduced a little bit later on, didn't we? And and my first reaction when I'm talking to Otley is, it must be bad if you're walking around with 2 lower life forms, referring to the 2 humans who hadn't played with us before and hadn't met Varys. And one of them completely ignores him, but Lynch, as Kevin, just goes, I'll see if you think, what was it? I'll see if you think I'm a lower life form when I ram my sword through your chest. And then something else happened, and as we're doing it, Varys just looks at Otley and goes, I like that guy, he's cool. Because that's just his sentiment. Like, he gave as good as he got, but he didn't instantly insult him. It was when he said something, and then 2 of them started bonding. And that was a fun, for me it was a very, very fun moment. And it's also, I like to take nods, which can be awkward for new players in our group, but whenever I run, I like to do nods to previous stuff. Like when I was running your campaign for that short while,
Yes.
Otley and Archie would be in a bar, and in would walk Matael and Lance, and they'd be arguing, because that's what they did.
Yeah.
And Archie's player Blake Mamba played in the same campaign that Matael and Lance was in, and it's very much like, cool, they're here, I haven't seen them in ages. And Otley's player Braze, obviously he played with us on the tail end of Matael and Lance being around, so he didn't know the characters personally as well as Blake Mamba did, but he's just like, okay, this is cool. And they had a little moment where they chatted and everything like that. When I showed off,
Drinking competition.
yeah, when Theoden came in that time and introduced himself, and all Otley kept on saying, because he's a dwarf that can't tell the difference between male and female elves, he's just like, oh yes ma'am, sorry ma'am, and Theoden's just like, I'm a man. That's what I said. I said man. And that was funny. But it's, to me, D&D has always been a time for me and my friends to just sit around and have a laugh, but also have moments. I mean, one thing to bear in mind in our group is that that's how you and Demaster got together, was through D&D.
Well, it is, but yeah.
That's how you two first got together.
First connecting characters. We
Yeah.
pitched this magazine, and we were sat in this tent reading it, and it turned out to be a porn mag.
Yeah,
You know?
that was Holly and the first Canary, wasn't it? That was the
Yep.
first time you two really connected as friends, because although you knew each other before, that was the first time you two really came together as mates, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And
And
then
that was in our first game
Yeah.
setup.
and
And
I've
it just sort of progressed from there, really.
I put you two getting together down to a single in-game moment, and that was when Zuriel and Lance fell in love, for want of a better word. It's always been one of my favourite moments in our games, but when you two had that moment at Neverwinter,
Yes.
it was even funny because you had a boyfriend at the time who was there,
Yeah.
and your characters, and you didn't see that as weird because you were just mates. But then from that, and the love that existed between your two characters, after you split with your boyfriend at the time, you two started spending a lot more time with each other, and then you ended up together, and you still are together after almost 3 years this year. So I put down D&D is what got you guys together on a different level, and that's always kind of like been a moment where I'm just like, that's what D&D has the ability to do, to bring people together like nothing else. I mean, I remember.
Talking of being together, there are a lot of D&D weddings going around at the moment.
Yes, because it's incredibly common for friends who have met through D&D for their characters to fall in love, or to fall in love with each other over the game, and it translates to the game, which I've always thought, because if you think about it, and we've spoken about this before in private, but you can tell a lot about a person by their D&D character.
Especially more so of their first character.
Yes.
Because their first character seems to be more or less based on where they see
Yeah.
themselves in a fantasy setting.
Now, of course, there are exceptions to that. For example, my first character wasn't based off of me. He was based off of Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. I don't think I ever really got around to making myself as a character until I made Matiel. Matiel, realistically, was the first one that was purely intended as to be like what I imagine myself to be in a fantasy setting. With you, I'd say that Zuriel was the first one, really.
Well, that was more
Holly,
out of my shell,
Holly,
big
yeah.
event thing.
Holly was you to begin with, you know, quite,
But Holly was a very quiet, sit in a corner
yeah.
type of a person, which at that stage in life I was.
Yeah.
I was that person.
Zuriel, however, was the shy, happy, optimistic. She was Pinkie Pie.
Yeah.
She was Pinkie Pie with a little bit of Fluttershy in there as well. You'd just be she started off as quite quiet, but then she got more sure and started, you know, trusting like the rest of her party more and everything like that. It started becoming more and more like outward and expressive, and the happy moral centre of the group that would just be, let's do this, guys, and we'd be all like, and you'd be like, let's do this, yay. and then we'd
Yeah.
and then we'd like do whatever needed to do. And I'd say the first time, the one that was that for the master was most likely, I'd say, the first Canary, which was his first character.
Yeah, which said nothing.
Yeah,
Very,
very
what he
very
did say
quiet.
was very slow,
Yeah,
very meaningful.
yes, he didn't speak unless it was important. And
And even then, you might get about 3 words.
yeah. But I've always really enjoyed playing it with you guys, and I wouldn't want it to change for anything. Like I want to play with other groups, but that's because I want to learn, or I want to perfect different skills in the other groups, and I want to see what it's like playing with other people, and then come back to you guys with what I've learned. You know, and
Well, I've been asked, because there's, admittedly, there is quite a few girls playing, but it's still a very maleistic.
yeah, it's a very male-dominated game. And-
I've been asked by our local game shop if I wanted to do a all-female variant,
Yes.
which sounds amazingly interesting to do, but I'm not sure when that's being set up yet.
No. And I think that'd be good as well, because I think a lot of girls can be put off with D&D, and it's not something that, this is going to be quite controversial for me to say, but I think there's a lot of creepy guys in D&D. We know a few.
There are.
And
Yes. I refuse to play with a couple of them.
yes, and it can put them off very quickly. I mean, when I think about it now, it's only been fairly recently that I've played characters that have actively tried to hit on women. In fact, I think the last one was a squat, and that was mostly done as a joke for Eyebrow's character because he was playing Zagel, and he just went along with it and was just like, yeah, sure, and we just ended up being in this relationship, which totally wasn't awkward when I used to go back home to my partner at the time and just be like, and she'd be like, hey, how did D&D go? And I'd be like, oh yeah, it went great. I slept with Eyebrows, and she just looked at me and go, what? And I'm like, he's character. Me and Eyebrow's character in a relationship. And she just look at me and go, what? And it's like, oh, Eyebrows is playing as a woman. So, you know, our characters getting along quite well, working together a lot. We ended up falling for each other. And she was just so confused. But for the most part, I've tended to play loners. But I know guys that just act weird around the D&D table and use the role play as an excuse to act weird. Obviously not going to name any names, but me and you have both known a lot of people who are like that, and it's like there's no need for it.
Yeah.
It can already be quite hard for a woman to get into these male-dominated hobbies. Not just D&D, but also other stuff such as Warhammer, any of the other games produced by, say, Warlords, such as Bolt Action or anything. It can be quite hard for them to get into because they're very male dominated. I mean, when I really think about it, you're the only female 40k player I know. Like, personally know.
Really?
Oh no, tell a lie. I forgot about Di. But you forget. I've kept it in our core, like, inner group. When it comes to D&D, I've never overly played, but I don't know any other female, personally, any other female 40k players.
Iodana does have a huge sisters army.
Yes.
She doesn't play very often.
For her, it's much like you. She's more of a painter, isn't she?
Yeah, but her models, because they're all metal, they are extremely heavy to move around.
Yes.
So she doesn't move them around very much.
But
Plus, being metal, they're very fragile and will shatter.
yes, they will. Because it's just the nature of the old metal models.
Yeah. I think, like, going back to the whole critical role point, that they have a really good mix
Of male,
girls and
yeah,
guys.
definitely.
And I think that has pushed quite a few girls to just jump at the chance.
Well, it's
Like,
more
they can do it, we can do it.
more to the point is a lot of the ladies in Critical Role are badasses, but they're not Mary Sue's. They're just badasses, like Vexalia.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to fuck with Vexalia.
No.
No. Another.
Jester with a giant lollipop is
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to fuck.
Like,
Never mind Vexalia. I wouldn't want to fuck with Jester either. Jester. Laura Bailey, you are an amazing voice actress. I've got nothing but respect for the work that you've done with Critical Role. Never mind everything else. But you have created terrifying characters. Another... I mean, I can't think of the name of the voice actress, unfortunately. I'm very, very sorry. But she played Keyleth, who's very, very shy and like cute animals and everything like that. But at the end of the day, she was a druid, and druids can be very powerful in the right circumstances.
they are terrifying.
Yeah.
If you annoy one, they are terrifying.
Yeah. And bearing in mind, they had a stereotypical horny bard in their Season 1 campaign. But
They did.
I don't think Scanlan was overdone. He's a perfect example of a horny bard that's done right. Which led to later things of everyone just like, you know, the whole jokes and the memes about if you play a bard, you have to be like this, you have to be
But
this
it
sex
wasn't,
pest.
Like, from what I've seen of snippets and things like that, it wasn't over the top.
No. But to be fair, Sam Rigel, however you pronounce it, I'm very, very sorry, has a very good way of... He's very over the top in his mannerisms and how he acts anyway. And it's little things, like... You may not have noticed this, Midnight, but obviously they would all have like drinks whenever they were drinking, not alcohol necessarily or anything like that, but they have drinks, and you'd have Grog, or like Grog's actor Travis Winningham with this tiny tankard, and then Sam, who played as a gnome, with this giant ass tankard to reflect like this.
Yes,
Yeah,
I watched that clip.
I thought that was such a little nod to him. I've always loved that, and that was a really common thing for him to have. But I like that kind of thing. I like the like the little nods that you do, and when you play, like I've spoken about it before. But Lynch, that time when you guys met the Admiral, and everyone else is just talking to him, and he's silent during most of this interaction, but he stood to attention, and I'm just like, at ease, Sergeant, and he stands at ease, and like we do like the whole
He
bit.
actually got out of his chair for that.
Yeah,
That was,
and we're like all like still talking and everything like that, and at the end I'm just like, okay then, thank you very very much. You may all leave now. And then I look at him and go, dismiss, Sergeant. And he comes to attention, salutes, and then turns to the right and walks off. And I'm just like, right, all of you, that was nothing. He just did so much in those two little bits. Like, that was amazing. And he was just like, oh, it's just like, you know, it seems natural. And I was just like, yeah, but that's the whole point. Yes, it was natural, but it was just really, really good.
it worked.
Yeah. But we've had some really, really good moments, like roleplay wise, moments that have made you laugh, moments that make you angry in the moment but make laugh later. And as a
We had some very weird moments.
yes,
Very weird.
yes,
moments.
we have. One of my favourite role playing moments for myself was that time that we was in Davy Jones' locker. And we came across the Nightfall in there with that alternate Sevatar, and I completely lost it, and everyone's just like, you're okay, dude. I'm just completely losing it because Sevatar was a friend of my character, because this was when he was first introduced, before I played as Sevatar. And I'm completely losing it because my friend isn't here, and everyone's like, okay, Mike's losing the plot here.
And I spent the entire game trying to pick up unbolt this table.
Yes. But
This arcane enchanting whatever it was table.
But we've got this good mix of that's a really dumb idea and that's brilliant. It's like
Then
this
we
good,
tossed the dwarf
yeah.
into a den of dragonborn. Like,
Yes,
and everyone just stood up.
yeah. Does anyone?
at him.
Someone chuck me over there. Okay. Anyone gonna go with him? Nope. Okay. And like half the group had teleport, and we just watched him there for about 5 rounds. And he's like, "Will someone come and help me?" Nope. That was I.
Meant to be making a peaceful negotiation with them.
Yeah, and but it was to teach an idiot a lesson about jumping headfirst into situations. And then we went over and saved him. We didn't let him die or anything, but
You know what he did? The player actually did that in real life anyway, and it actually taught him how to not jump as much.
yeah. I
Like,
mean,
he learned a very hard lesson.
yeah. I mean, another one that's more recent always makes me laugh was Blake Mamba's diplomacy solution.
Oh, yeah.
That was the reaction from the players as it's all going down. And essentially we'd come across I don't know the names of the actual monsters, but they're like human scorpion centaurs. And we'd been
Hold on,
sent,
I will get it for you.
yeah. And we'd been
It's
essentially
on the
hired,
map thing. Hold on.
yeah, but we'd been hired by somebody to take them out because they'd been attacking this lumber camp. So we go there, and we'd had to end our game, and we was going to come back to it in the next session. And for some reason, Blake Mamba, playing as Sarah Fairfield, it was Sarah Fairchild, had completely forgotten what these things were, and went, I want to do diplomacy, and we were all like, I don't think that's really a good idea, dude. I'm not entirely sure that they can even speak common. And he's just like, no, I want to try diplomacy, and we were all like, okay, are you sure that you want to do this? He's like, I'm sure. And we're like, all right, we'll all like keep close in case things go low. Because like, I'll approach them on my own. I'm like, all right, we'll stay close in case things go like badly. He approaches them on his own, immediately gets stabbed, and the poison does paralysis, doesn't it?
There we go. They are Tlincalli. Tlincalli.
Right.
And
And
they are scorpion folk.
and he immediately gets poisoned, and we just jump into action straight away. And then both myself and Praise just go, "Hey, Blake Mamba, how'd that diplomacy work out for you?" As we're fighting all of these things off, I become a human. I become a Drow Baneblade in the middle of the fight.
Yep.
And then he gets carried off, and we're trying to like stop him from getting carried off. Midnight's panicking because she's running the game. She's just like, "This is supposed to be a simple fight," and they can. And we're like, "No, it's his own fault. Let him die. let him die. It was his own fault for being an idiot." And it's always become a joke now in the group of, how's that diplomacy working out for you? But diplomacy is an important fact of D&D. It's just knowing when to use it, and that wasn't the right moment to use it.
No, I even seconds before this had given them a rundown of what was going on. Like, I don't think he was paying attention.
Another moment later on when he was playing as Archie, and because he's a goblin, he was trying to sell something to a shopkeep, and the shopkeep was messing around with price because he's a goblin. And
Well, first things first, he didn't really want to sell it. He didn't want to interact with him very much.
yeah,
Because goblins are normally seen as vile creatures.
yeah, and Blake Mamba had been warned about this, and it devolved to a point where Archie was just like, "That's it, I'm carpet bombing the entire market. Screw all of you." And we're like, Archie, the ISIS goblin, like,
Yeah.
but very grim joke. But it was just like it just devolved so quickly to.
To stop him, I ended up having to put like a magic ceiling across the like as a barrier to stop him doing it. Like, he got arrested, you know.
It was a whole thing. It was just
He
like.
ran out of the city, and
And it's just like, yes, they were being racist, but that was the whole point. Admittedly, I'm pretty sure he was on his own, which didn't
He
help.
was.
Which didn't help matters
No, it didn't.
for him either,
Everybody else had left.
because it very much became a common thing now, where if anyone would belittle him or be racist to him, one of the group members would stick up for him, just be like, "Don't you fucking talk to Archie that way." Even if we think that he's an idiot, he's our idiot. No one else gets to be nasty to him. He's our idiot. Don't you
Yeah.
just try it. And as time's gone on, the group has
He
gotten.
ventured out on his own and
Yeah.
panicked and ran away.
I mean, it's like I didn't
He made it
realise.
better, though.
Well, when I was running your campaign, and I'm going over what's going to happen. Well, no, what was it? Yeah, Archie got kidnapped, and the master just out of nowhere went, "This is the third time you've been kidnapped, Archie. For fuck's sake, what are you doing?" I just actually went, "Is it?" And he's just like, "Yes, this is the third game in a row where you've kidnapped the goblin." And I'm like, "Shit, it is." Like looking through my notes, and I'm just like, I didn't even realise I was doing it, but I kept on kidnapping the goblin. And it just became a thing where I think my favourite comment was from Eyebrows, where he was just like, "You're Mokuba from Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged." Like, at this point,
At least the other guy had cookies.
yeah, at least, yeah. At this point, you've been kidnapped by anyone. You've even been kidnapped by members of your own party. But
Yeah, but he has been picked up
Y-
and
yeah.
moved by the members of the party.
we need you to identify something.
Magic on it.
It's just like, yay! That was my funniest reaction from Blake Mamba anyway, as he's dragged off by
Oh, yeah,
Begraval to do
yeah.
something. He's just like, "I'm useful!" And I just broke down laughing because I'm just like, "Do you even know he's taking you?" No! But it's... Archie's one of my favourite characters from Blake Mamba now, because overlooking it, he has been a very, very good character. Annoying as all hell, but it is a good character at its core. But
Is actually his favourite one.
well, it was the only one that everyone was nice to because, and as I pointed out, everyone decided we're going to do what Rise Inquisitor does, and everyone just made, for want of a better word, arsehole characters that were very standoffish with each other. So we was all very aggressive and very horrible to each other. But because Sarah was so sweet and nice and polite to everyone, she got the least of it. And I think Blake Mamba liked it because for once he wasn't...
Well, she balanced the group.
Yeah, she was...
All the arseholeness.
I mean, I think moments for us are a very important part when it comes to D&D. Like that, whenever we talk about D&D, it's always specific moments that always make me laugh. Like the Christmas game with you and Eyebrows.
Yes.
Oh, that was so funny. I'd been sitting on that for an hour. For want of a better term, we run like holiday special games, if you will. They're like they're not canon to the main storyline. They're just additional little things, and they'll get like funny gimmick items at the end of it. Like Halloween was the first, is our most popular one to do, but we also do Christmas ones. And the game starts off with everyone having to roll con saving throws for being drunk, which the master failed for the entire game, and they like Santa appears and he's like, I've been attacked by the Red Gobbo. He's trying to take over Christmas. I need your help delivering presents in the local area. And then we were just like, yeah, sure. And Braze said, everyone paired off or grouped off. You went off with Eyebrows. The master went off on his own, and Blake Mamba and Braze teamed up. And Braze said, I'm picking up the presents and I'm going to go. The master said, I'm picking up the presents and I'm going to go. But neither you nor Eyebrows said that you picked up the presents. So about an hour later, after I've gone through what everyone's doing, I get to you guys. And you're trying to get in. You check the windows. Nope, they're locked. Okay, we'll go through the chimney then. So they go up to the chimney, get stuck, use some butter to get their way down.
And I had a halfling, so I had a pair of stilts.
Yep. Finally get down there.
To wiggle our way up
Yeah.
down.
Finally, yeah, but you finally get into the house, and there's some goblins there. You fight them off, and then I'm laughing so hard because I've been waiting to say this for about an hour, and I just go, which one of you's got the presents? And both of you simultaneously just go, she does. Or he does. And then you're like, wait, what? And I'm in hysterics because I'm like, no, you said you picked them up, so I've been waiting for that for ages. You know, going through all of that, and then they're like, oh, that means we've got to go up the fucking chimney again. And then I can't remember who it was, where it was your Eyebrows that are just like, oh, I'm just going to check the door, and then it's unlocked, and you're just like, God damn it! Like all of that. In total, I even said this to you guys at the time. If you'd have checked the door while she was outside, I would have said it was locked, obviously. But because you didn't check the door, that gave me carte blanche to have it unlocked. And I thought that was just the penultimate moment. So I think that was the last of it that you guys did before you ended up... You just went back to get the presents and then went back there with no hassle whatsoever. Another moment from that game when Braze and Blake Mamba had to deliver to the orphanage and they get pulled over by goblins pretending to be the police. And they're just like, we're not idiots, I can tell you're goblins. And then they get to the orphanage, and the nun at the orphanage is so sus, and it's very clear that she's a succubus and everything like that. And Braze is just like, nope, we deliver the presents, come on, we're going. And he just, first time the goblin got kidnapped, he's just picked up by Braze and just like, we're going. But no, we are going. We did what we was here to do. And he just leaves, like, no care whatsoever. He's just like, I'm not getting involved in this. I am leaving. Meanwhile, Demaster is sat in a tree, patiently waiting for his ambush.
He is so dumb. He's just guarding this Christmas tree.
It was even funny. He was just like, I'm going to sit in this Christmas tree and wait for the goblins to show up. But then he had to go and deal with the boy. Because the boy wanted some attention or some help with one of his toys, didn't he? Because we actually held it on Christmas Day. So the master went and did that and didn't come back until about 3 hours later. And he's like, right, where am I? What's going on? And at this point, you guys have progressed so much that I'm just like, oh crap, I've left you in the tree. And then I'm in hysterics because this entire game, this Dragonborn has just been sat in a tree and hasn't done anything.
He is a blue Dragonborn, by the way.
Yeah,
Okay.
so not camouflaged at all. So, I mean, admittedly, at the time, Damaster was a bit miffed because he'd been left behind, but I'd continued the game whilst he was busy, and I felt really bad, but now he sees the funny side of it, and it's just like, yes, I was stuck in a tree this entire goddamn time, but that's really, really funny. Like, and just as a core concept for a story, everyone's having this epic adventure. I'm in a tree, and and I think it was about
Yeah. He
6.
also acquired a baby mimic from somewhere. I can't
Yes.
remember where he got it from. He dressed it up as a present.
But then I think it was I gave you guys as your reward for it. All of them got a candy cane that effectively, when eaten, gave them the effects of the spell Armor of Agathis, which gives you 10 temporary hit points, and if you're attacked, they take however like D10 ice damage or cold damage normally, don't they? It's something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And I said, okay, instead of it doing cold damage, it does Christmas cheer damage. And I was like, okay, that's cool.
Resistant to it.
Yeah, but it was a one-use item, like a health potion. And they took that, and I think it was like 8 months later or something. I'm running your campaign for that short period, and then out of nowhere, Archie just goes, "I'm going to eat my candy cane," and I'm like, "What fucking candy cane?" It's like the one that you gave me for Christmas, and I'm like, "Holy shit, you've still got that?" And he's like, "Yeah, I've got it." And he just eats this candy cane. He's just like, "Let's go." I'm like, "That's awesome!" Like, he's kept it for 8 months, and it's just become and that helped him survive an attack, and I was just like, "Sweet." But D&D, in case you can't tell, is a big, massive deal for us, and I love it. But I'm going to be ending the podcast there for now. Thank you very, very much for joining us, or if you're catching this later, listening to this point. Next episode we'll be going to a more standardized time, so we're looking at doing them on Sundays. So look for us on Sunday at 8 p.m. at around about 8 to 8:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And the next subject in episode 3 will be Warhammer 40,000. Yes, again, we're going back to it, but we are going to be discussing some of the new releases that have come out this time, our opinions on them, and the buzz that is being generated around this new Warhammer Plus thing. Is it worth it? Hopefully we'll know by that point a little bit more, and we'll go over speculations on what it is going to be including. So from myself, Rise Inquisitor, and Midnight Wolf,